Well, first of all, thank you all for the introduction. You gotta love the internet because the internet did get one thing wrong, which is I am not a host of the locker room with Billy Schwan. But I think that's the funny nuance of all of this stuff, which is the fact that when it comes to media, you don't really have one job. And when it comes to public speaking, if you only think you're doing public speaking and just sit up in front of a bunch of people, that's where you're wrong. So I've had a pretty crazy career. I actually started as a newspaper writer back in 2004 before I got in the radio. And since then, I've done radio, I've done YouTube shows, I did all kinds of things. So it's funny that you said that I'm a host of, because in the media world, if you're just a host of, you're kind of a loser, okay? That's the funny thing about media, and that is you have to be able to do 20 different things in order to have value in media. So as I mentioned, I was a freelance newspaper writer back in the day. I hosted my first radio show when I was 21 years old. I have been programming radio stations at different jobs over the years. So basically, if you hear something on the radio, if something goes wrong, I'm probably the guy fixing it. So I've also done marketing and media sales. I've done digital media content. I have my own YouTube channel. I do a lot of reels and streaming, obviously because it's sports, so a lot of the content is sports related, but I've done other content as well over the years. As well, I've done accounts receivable. So just by the sheer nature of you got to pay bills, you got to do jobs you don't always want to do. And you guys are going to learn when you get older is that sometimes you do the job you don't want to do, which also involves calling people, asking them why they haven't paid their radio ad bill, which is always a fun conversation. Also, I have scheduled commercials, and I've done high school sports, but I play broadcasting. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything over the years. So I think that's why I think the internet is funny, because the internet will give you a little bit of information, but it doesn't actually tell the whole story, which is 90% of what I do, you will never see or hear. And that's the crazy part. Because that's me back in 2003. Me earlier this year. And the reason why I want to bring up this picture is because of the fact that this guy, if you had told him that this guy would be doing this, I would have said you were nuts. And there's a reason why. So part of being able to communicate is being a public speaker. Part of public speaking is communicating. They're all one and the same. So if any of you noticed, I am breaking a school rule right now. Or at least used to be a school rule, which is I'm chewing gum. I don't know if that's still a rule or not, but at least it was when I was your guys' age. The reason why I'm breaking that rule is because in order for me to get from here to here, I had to figure some things out, which is I have very intense anxiety about everything. Chewing gum is one of my coping mechanisms. I actually have 3 cubes of Orbit white gum, which is my favorite gum. Anybody ever wants to know, that's what I chose. But this kid thought he knew everything at that age. This guy doesn't know everything, and he's better off for it. And I'm going to go to what part of the conversation is today, which is so much of public speaking is not about what you fear, it's about what you are willing to do. Because anything in life is about how can I get from here to here. So this event over here, I was at charity event. They were raising money at Landscape Boardwalk for a fundraiser. And they asked me to get up there instead of just being on the radio, which is the real reason I'm supposed to be there. But the person who was going to speak didn't want to speak, to announce the winners of every single race. So I was there for an extra hour announcing all of the winners and giving out prizes. Because that's in life what you have to do sometimes, which is you have to be willing to evolve from this person to that person. Because this person would have never thought he would be in anything media. He would have told me that, like, you're nuts. And now I'm the guy that people call on asking, can you do this? Can you do that? Or like last night when I had to log into the radio station at 12 o'clock at night because we had dead air. That's always fun. No. By the way, dead air is when there's no audio on the radio, which is like, you can get in trouble for that with the FCC, which is the federal governing body for media. So I purposely grabbed a couple quotes here because what you may not know is, well, you did get it correct, I am a history major, is that what all 3 of these men have in common is they were all very much outcast in society during their era. All 3 of them were considered weirdos. Marcus Aurelius today is considered one of the greatest Caesars of all time, but he was considered a psycho because he didn't really think that persecution was really necessary. He thought people should all just get along, and live together. And what was interesting about Marcus Aurelius at the time, people treated him like he was like some like weirdo because he didn't want to go out and like conquer people and like murder everybody like some Caesars did. And the reason I use this example is because this is actually from his writing called Meditations, where he says, "Today I escaped from anxiety," or "No, I discarded it because it was within me in my own perceptions, not outside." And so many times when it comes to communication, when you have a conversation with somebody, we all walk into that conversation with ideas in our own mind about how the conversation is going to go. Is this person going to like what I say? Are they going to hate what I'm going to say? Are they actually going to even care what I have to say? And a lot of that is in our own mind. It's actually not existing outside of ourselves. And the reason why Marcus Aurelius wrote that is because the Roman Senate hated his guts. They thought he was a weirdo. So when he was out, it was ironic because the person who took over for him is actually the reason for the downfall of Rome 100 years later, because it started pillaging people. Bruce Lee, most people have heard of him. He is the father of modern mixed martial arts. He created his own martial art discipline. He was also an individual who was a very deep philosopher. But Bruce Lee was hated because Bruce Lee integrated martial art disciplines, which was considered taboo and considered a no-no at the time. He believed that growing as a human being means finding what works and bringing it all together. Well, the problem was that people didn't like that. The idea of combining karate with kung fu with other martial art disciplines was considered psycho. And, in fact, Bruce Lee pitched the original idea for the TV show, you might have seen, or maybe your parents have seen it, but there was a TV show many years ago with an actor named David Carradine. And it was about a karate master. Well, that was actually Bruce Lee's idea. They stole his idea to ABC Studios and said, well, we can't have an Asian man be the lead of a television show in America. So he said, well, never mind. I'm going to go to Asia, make my own movies. And then 4 years later, he was being so successful, they brought him back to America to make the movie Enter the Dragon, which is actually still one of the highest grossing martial art films of all time. Bruce Lee said, do not fear failure. Not failure, but low aim is the crime. In great attempts, it is glorious even to fail. He said this back in 1966 after he got his rear handed to him by a bunch of thugs in Seattle. A bunch of thugs were mad that he moved into the neighborhood and set up his own dojo. So 10 guys came to his gym. He fought them all off. At the end of it, he realized that he did not know as much about fighting as he thought he did. Then he devoted the rest of his life becoming arguably the greatest martial artist of all time. Seneca is a famous Stoic, not as much because people actually cared about him at the time. He's actually a loser at the time because he was actually not Roman. He was Spanish. He was brought into the Roman Empire as an advisor to the man who would become Caesar, who would later kill him, named Nero. Seneca had a lot of anxiety problems because he was basically treated like a pariah by everybody in Rome. He once said, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. So many times, what we are stressing about is public speaking, or when it comes to communicating, or just whatever. It could be anything in life. And a lot of it is in our own head. It actually doesn't exist in reality. So why public speaking and becoming a good communicator is important? It helps you be heard and taken seriously. Let's be realistic. Nobody wants to say something and people make fun of them, people put them down. Listen, I remember when I was in school, when I was your guys' age, I was picked on a lot, okay? And what I learned over time is that the more willing you are to become better at communicating, the better you are, you will be heard. If people don't want to hear you, maybe you can come up with a couple of quick quick answers, make them shut up and leave you alone. That's one fun thing as well. It empowers you to share your ideas. A lot of times in today's world, listen, with social media today, it wasn't like this when I was your guys' age. People are allowed to go out there and say whatever they want, whether it's true, good, bad, whatever. And the thing is that sharing your ideas is important because in a world that tries to tell you to be like everybody else, you should always be your own individual. Remember that. Makes completing projects for school and work easier. I will tell you right now, I am a horrible tester. I stink at tests. I am the greatest overthinker in the world. I'm the world's foremost expert at overthinking. I can read the overthinking on you before you even do it. But you know what I got good at? Writing papers. And the only reason why I was National Honor Society in high school was not because I was a great student. I stopped doing my English classes, I'll admit that. It was because I became a good writer. And so if you become a good communicator and a good public speaker, you can say, you know what, I'm not good at one aspect of school, but you know what, I can make this school stuff a little easier by perfecting something else. Finally, build confidence for every area of life, from your professional world to your personal life. Let's be realistic. Communication and public speaking is not just about some guy standing up in front of all of you with a touch screen that is, well, this is about half the size of what one of these was when I was your age. But the point is that public speaking is about just talking to people every day. You see somebody at lunch. You play sports with somebody. You're in a school activity with somebody. You want to be in a band with somebody. If you cannot communicate and have the confidence to talk to that person, to have that relationship, to build that connection, then your life doesn't get any better. You become the person who does not grow. You become the person who gets left behind. And let's be realistic. I'm not talking about the person being left behind at school dance. Nobody cares about that. 10 years, 20 years. I'm talking about when you get to a point in life where you're at a job, you get to a point in you like somebody. Maybe you want to talk to somebody you think they're cute, maybe whatever. You know what? You want to have the confidence to tell that person, to communicate with them. That, you know what? You find them interesting. How do you become a better communicator, public speaker? I grabbed 2 quotes. By the way, I'm very obsessed with Bruce Lee. He is one of my idols. That's why I use him a lot. He said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Bruce Lee used to hold the international record for karate championships. One of his expert moves was the 6-inch punch. He practiced that punch his entire life, and he could actually knock somebody halfway across a mat with literally this much distance from his fist to their chest. He actually almost killed somebody one time by accident. He stopped their heart. They had heart arrhythmia the rest of their life, which is ironic because then he found out about it. The guy wanted to keep it a secret, and he secretly paid for his medical bills. So practice makes perfect. If you want to get better at public speaking, you have to be willing to practice. Practice in front of the mirror. Take films of yourself. You might hate your voice. I hate my voice. I don't like listening to myself at all. But you know what? If you don't listen to yourself, you don't get better. It's because if you listen to yourself, you practice, you write things down. That's the second part. Take notes, write down your thoughts. The National Institute of Health, along with the Department of Psychology at the University of Wisconsin, conducted multiple studies that revealed over the last 20 years that writing not just helps brain function, but strengthens your communication skills. There's a reason why your teachers tell you to take notes in class, because it helps you process information. And the better you process information, the better you can verbalize that information. So I have a couple audio clips from a couple interviews I've done in recent years. I want to play them for you guys, kind of give an example of why being a good communicator puts you in a position to be successful. We'll also find out how you know how to learn this word. You mentioned the Eagles organization. You know, a lot of people always ask the question, what makes the Eagles organization different? So for you, as someone who was originally with the Houston Texans, even though I remember correctly, you played a year with the Rams and a year with the Giants, you played with a couple different teams. So what makes Jeff Lurie, Howie Rose, the Philadelphia Eagles organization?
You know, that's a big question, but I honestly think because of the city campaign. Because there's no time ever sort of rebuild or to sort of be mediocre. Like you need to be all in all the time. And that's because the city's at the end, right? I think that's what pushes the Eagles and everybody in the organization constantly trying to move to be better. It's the whole, I think it's the whole accountable stuff.
So that was the former Eagle linebacker and current former Eagles executive, the organization, Connor Barlow. He played in the NFL for over 10 years. He works for the Eagles organization now. And if you heard what I asked him that question, he was not prepared to answer the question. Why? Because part of being a good communicator is not asking the same thing everybody else does. As you get older, you don't want to be the person who asks the same question to everybody. You don't want to be the person who says, nice sneakers, nice hat, nice shirt, Eagles fan. You don't want to be the person who observes the obvious. You want to be the person who is able to find another layer to the conversation. If you heard, this is the guy who's been interviewed by hundreds and hundreds of people over the years. That guy, he played in the NFL, for goodness sake. I made him pause and think about my question because he realized this is not a normal question. So the next one I'm going to play for you. So there's a very famous journalist named Gary Myers. Gary Myers covered the NFL for almost 40 years at this point. And he's also on the committee to elect the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he's a pretty important guy. And he had recently written a book about the New England Patriots. And so I decided to, in my typical sense, ask an outside-the-box question.
How much longer do you think Robert Kraft is going to stay as involved in the organization as he is? I'm not trying to, say that he's fading away, but he is getting up there in age. And I know that, from your book and from other reporting that Jonathan has been more and more his son involved in the operations. How much longer do you think Robert Kraft is going to be as involved as he is in the Patriots organization?
It's a very good question, and I've been asked so much about how long Brady and Belichick are going to stick around, and that's kind of a first for me with Kraft. And I don't know the answer to that. I think he's got some years left in him, and when I've talked to him, and he seems still very much engaged in the ownership of that team and running it. And yes, Jonathan is the obvious successor in waiting.
I asked a man who has done thousands of interviews, who has interviewed thousands of people, a question that made him pause and say, that's a good question. No one has ever asked that. Because over the last 20 plus years, I have learned how to become a better communicator. It also helps that I read his book. I actually did research on the person who I was having a conversation with. So that is where I give you guys credit for your introduction today, because what you guys did is you said, I'm going to look this Josh up. I'm going to figure out who he is. By the way, kudos for getting my last name correct. People didn't always get that right as well. So, but still, you did your research. You looked it up. You actually looked into the person you are being associated with. And that's how you connect with people. Because communication, public speaking, is much more than just, again, standing up in front of people, speaking on a microphone. It's about connection with people. Because if you can't connect with people, well, you're probably going to be pretty lonely, pretty miserable, pretty unhappy. And listen, it's not always going to go the way you want, but communication, public speaking is way more than the small scope that people think it is. So, I believe you said we have an opportunity for them to ask questions.
Absolutely. So we can transition to that, and maybe what we do is, because the students have prepared questions that are kind of more like public speaking kind of centered, right? And then we've got some maybe more kind of fun sports media questions. So why don't we, I'm going to turn to students, you can raise your hand, but why don't we focus on that first box of questions, the public speaking ones. And why don't you guys just raise your hand, and then Mr. Hennig can call on you. So.
What's your name?
Fiona.
Fiona? All right, what's your question?
How do you portray your voice to make your speaking more engaging?
I don't. I appreciate the question, because so historically, there's always been an idea where people say, hey, Fiona, you're going to come and do TV, you're going to do radio, you're going to do a YouTube video. You need to project your voice. Well, projecting your voice is a state of mind. It's actually not something you practice. You practice enunciation. You might practice how to say a name. Like the Philadelphia Eagles had a player who was on the Super Bowl championship team whose name was Halapuli Vati Vaitai. Yeah. All right. You learn how to enunciate. You learn how to say, and you actually can teach yourself. People can teach you about that. But when it comes to projecting your voice, when it comes to sounding broadcast worthy, it's literally more biological than it is anything else. It's the old music axiom where if you ever go to a music class, someone will tell you want to project from your stomach out. So that's more so what it is. But if anybody says that you have a good voice for speaking or a good voice for radio, that's a lie, because I hate my voice, and I've been doing this now for 20 years. People think I have a great voice. So, but I appreciate the question. What's your name?
Michael,
All right, what's your question, Michael?
has there ever been a time where speaking in front of people has been difficult for you?
Always. I would say it started when I was in 8th grade, because I used to be in choirs and stuff, and kids would make fun of me because I actually could sing. So it caused me not to want to do anything in front of people anymore. I think over time, I just stopped caring what people thought about me. I think that's the biggest key. You have to be willing to be a blunt instrument sometimes and just say what you're thinking. And if there's repercussions, you deal with it. That's why I thought I'm chewing gum right now, because it's one of my coping mechanisms. I would say that if you're ever in a position where you're worried about speaking in front of people, don't speak in front of people. Speak for yourself. You want to be able to put what's up here, what's on your paper, what's on your mind, what's on your heart, whatever it is. Don't do it for other people. Do it for yourself. And I think when you focus more on yourself and on other people, it's a lot easier. What's your name?
Me?
Well, you both put your hand at the same time. So, ladies first.
Kira,
Kira, what's your question?
in what ways is it different when speaking in front of a live audience versus a camera?
I think it's easier, because when you speak in front of a camera, you have to create in your own mind when you're talking to somebody. There's a lot of times I'm by myself at a radio studio and I'm talking to a microphone. I have no idea who's listening. Or if I'm making a YouTube video or a reel or something, I don't know who's going to see it. So I'm trying to fabricate in my mind that I'm speaking to somebody. I think talking to a live audience is better, because you at least can see people's reactions. As I speak, I see each one of your faces. I see, I can gauge, is what I'm saying interesting? Is what I'm saying not interesting? I can kind of read your faces. Like right now, not to play shrink on you, but you are way more engaged in this conversation we are having now than when you first came in here. Part of that is my observation throughout the day. I observed each one of you as you walked in here. Some of you have been fully engaged the whole time. Some of you have been engaging as we progress in the conversation. So that's why I think speaking in front of a live audience is easier, because you're actually talking to people. You're not talking to a figment of your imagination, let's say. And what's your name?
Andrew,
All right, Andrew, what's your question?
other than the gum stuff, how do you deal with when you're nervous when speaking in front of people, and not get caught up in your words and just stop?
So I would say that the best answer I have for how do you manage it, aside from the coping mechanism, is don't be afraid to feel. Don't bury things down, because what it does is it festers. It becomes basically almost like a cancer inside of you, psychologically, emotionally, all kinds of ways. If you're feeling a certain way, let's say you got a class coming up. You got to speak in front of class. Go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom. Put some water in your face. Scream at the wall. Do whatever you got to do to process your emotions, to get it out of your system. Don't be afraid to feel. Don't be afraid to process, because the more you process, the more you're able to let go of whatever is holding you back. And also, don't maybe take some time to understand why it's bothering you. Is it bothering you because you're just uncomfortable with it? Is it bothering you because you are afraid people will make fun of you? Are you afraid? What is bothering you? I think that's also good to understand. And maybe take notes about it. Maybe write down, as you're preparing for something. If you're nervous about a test, let's say, right? That test, you could, while you're doing your prep and you're getting frustrated, take a minute, sit down, stare at a blank wall, and be like, why is this frustrating me? So don't be afraid to process, okay? Who's next? What's your name?
Ian,
Ian, what's your question?
what is your motivation to speak on radio or on live TV to thousands of people?
My motivation is I love engaging with people on anything. I'm passionate about sports. I love to hear different sides of a perspective, even the perspective makes absolutely no sense at all. Or I think that the comment that someone makes is dumb. It's not my place to call them dumb. It's my position to see, well, how can I take I love the challenge of taking a conversation and advancing it. I love the challenge of saying, well, this person is stuck at point A. How can I take it to point B? It's the idea of how can I use every faculty that I have to make this more entertaining, more interesting, more engaging, educate people. In the media, they've called me the sports geek for 15 years now. And part of that is because I'm a bit of a nerd. Okay, I'm a bit of a guy who I do a ton of research. I like to dig deeper than most people do into things. I like to read body language. I like to investigate stuff. And it's frankly part of the reason why I hit on 62% of my picks during football season, because of the fact that I have an ability to see things. I dig deeper and I see other things people don't. And I love the opportunity to engage more people on those things. And it doesn't have to always be sports. It could be anything. Your teacher, Mrs. Powell, she heard a segment that we did with the song Shabuzi, where the song is actually stolen from two different artists. And he claims he got the permission from the one artist, but he didn't get the permission from the other artist. Well, on the radio, I took a pretty hard stance that, you can't tell me that you didn't know that this was stolen from somebody. Like, come on, you can't be that oblivious. And, there are a lot of oblivious people out there, but sometimes you just got to take a position. And, like I said, I'm a bit of a blunt instrument. So, part of it is being willing to be a blunt instrument. Who's next? What's your name? What is it? Seneca? What's your question?
How do you prepare for
Aside from making a PowerPoint presentation, which I realize is much easier on Canva than it is on PowerPoint, I take notes. I write my thoughts down. I read over the notes. I think about it. I kind of stole the idea from I used to do mock trial back in the day. You're not allowed to bring the notebook into the classroom with you. You're not allowed to bring your notes in the you can't bring a note. You can't bring your notes to a test usually, right? You can't be the person who's got like 3 pages of notes to sift through them for the questions. So it's more so about memorization and putting it to memory, and then trusting that you'll remember what's important. And if you don't remember something, just kind of letting it be. I think that's probably the larger thing, because you might think of something like 2 hours. Like, I should have said that. Why didn't I think of that? And it's like, well, maybe there's a reason why I didn't. You move on, but you try your best to write things down. You try to take notes and try to execute it the best way possible. Anyone else? What's your name?
Connor.
Connor?
How do you prevent your voice from getting?
I usually drink a lot of water. I also drink different types of tea throughout the day. I drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of fluids. But it also takes practice. It's like with any muscle. The more you use it, the more you handle it, the more you balance it, the easier it is for you to extend. It's like, they kind of use the physiology aspect of it, right? So most people, as they get older, they lose their physical flexibility, their dexterity, their ability to do things athletically, right? Like, your parents are probably not as athletic now as they were 15, 20, 30 years ago, right? Well, the same thing physically. So you want to be able to train your body to maintain its ability, its flexibility, its dexterity, which is why I can do this and most people cannot. Because the first sport I ever played was gymnastics, and I did martial arts for 20 years. So I maintain that flexibility throughout my whole life. You don't get better at something if you don't keep practicing. So that's part of the key to that. Who's next?
Maybe do about 3 more of the public speaking questions.
Okay. Also remember, there's no dumb questions, it's dumb people who are answering questions. So the questioner is never the problem, it's the person who's answering. So don't ever think you have a bad question.
Should I call in some folks? Emma?
What's that? Do I get nervous when I do public speaking? I typically get nervous before. Like for example, you see me with the headset on, right? So like when I do radio shows, there's like a 10, 20-second period before the show starts where I'm basically losing my mind. Okay. And then when the show starts, or when the event starts, or when whatever starts, I've kind of trained myself to be able to hit the switch and move forward. But I kind of let it all out of my system before I get started, so it doesn't like stop me from going. If that makes sense. That's a good question, because of the fact that so much in life is not about people. Like I said, you don't see the 90% of the work that I do for the 10% that you see. So, don't ever think of it as, hey, what am I going to do? No, you're just going to do. You learn how to do, and then you execute. Does that make sense? Cool.
Other than chewing gum, what are some other coping mechanisms you have used?
Let's see here. Well, there's martial arts. There's exercise, music. Music's always a good one. I probably have a very eclectic music library that ranges from Motown to classic rock to old school hip hop, the country to new metal. My music tastes all over the place. So like I have like music based on my mood, basically. So I think music's probably an underrated tool for sure. You said one more?
Yeah, let's have one more and then transition to the second.
You mean the fun part?
Yeah, the fun part. It's all fun, Mr. Hennig, right? It's all. Willa, what do you got?
When did you start?
What's that?
When did you start?
When did I start? I think the first time I remember public speaking was probably 4th grade. I had to give a presentation in front of a bunch of kids, and yeah, that was not ideal. But I think that over time I became more comfortable with it because, like I said, I kind of just started practicing it. The more you do, the more you can, kind of thing. It's like, when you guys get older and you start driving, right? You don't get better at driving by not driving, right? You don't get better at, playing a sport by not playing the sport. So I think it's about, no matter when you start, you want to get, there's an idea where it's like, if you do something 1,000 times, it becomes a habit. If you do it 10,000 times, it becomes second nature. That's why Bruce Lee had the quote about the strikes, right? So if you say, whether you start public speaking at 10, 15, 20, whatever age you're speaking publicly, if you want to get better at it, you just got to keep doing it.
Actually have a question before we transition.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier the influence of like mock trial, right? In terms of just, getting better at public speaking. Can you talk a little bit about thinking back when you were in school, maybe middle school, some particular classes maybe that you were, or in high school that you were in, that maybe also kind of contributed to helping you build those public speaking skills?
Well, I would say the mock trial I think is very big, just because of the fact that you're forced to take the booklet home with you, read through it, memorize your lines, memorize other people's lines, memorize other parts of the case, or not even your own, and just be able to regurgitate it later. And for mock trial, you actually go to a courthouse and you go and stand in front of judges, and the judges, like real judges, are judging you on your ability to basically regurgitate information. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a great learning experience. I think anything involved doing it in front of people, being a part of a choir, playing sports, being involved in anything that involves you just standing in front of people or being around multiple people and forcing yourself to engage with people that maybe you don't usually talk to. That's a key to it as well. I think part of the thing with public speaking is, what's a great way to practice? I just thought of this. Talk to people that you don't know and practice on them. See what happens. It's almost like a social experiment. Like You're almost experimenting. You're like, if I say this person I never talked to, what happens? And then you learn. Now, you just got to be willing to accept rejection at that point. You got to be willing to accept, somebody like make fun of you, which you just got to be like, willing to take it. But, some of it is just being willing to do anything is part of the school. Maybe sometimes you sit and have lunch with somebody that you don't usually talk to, or maybe, if you're playing a sport, you're in a club, you're in an activity, and you socialize with somebody, you partner with someone that you usually don't partner with. That's a great way to create that mental dexterity.
All right, we'll go to the second half of your feed. What do you guys got? You can raise your hands since we're heading to talk.
Well, Fiona had her hand up before you even said it first.
How do you stay unbiased when talking about teams or players you like?
Great question. The answer is you just take your bias out of it. You say if you have a favorite player, you have a favorite team, you have a favorite anything, you almost want to go out of your way to say, well, what's the other side of the argument? You almost want to go out of your way to understand what the other side is. So there's an old legal axiom so I almost went to law school. That was my original life plan. I was going to be a sports agent and a lawyer, which obviously I didn't do because law school is very expensive. But one of the things they teach you in law school is that there are facts and then there are true facts. There are the facts that people find to support their argument. Then there are the true facts that are actually completely unbiased. So I try to find the facts that are completely unbiased and use that for my arguments. Now, that might frustrate some people because some people do the previous, which they're like, well, for example, Jalen Hurts, this is his completion percentage. Yeah, but completion percentage doesn't factor in drop passes. Completion percentage does not factor in an offensive lineman committing a penalty. Completion percentage is not affected by a lot of other stats. So is completion percentage really a good measure? Then someone gets mad at you and they call you an idiot and then you move on. But that's kind of how you stay unbiased. Try to find information that is not basically based on making you look good. It's based on you understanding the topic. All right, Eagles shirt here. What's your name?
Aiden.
What is it? Aiden, what's your question?
Who's like the most famous person you'd say you've ever like interviewed?
Good grief. Let's see who was in the previous picture. Well, that's the Uso brothers. Anybody a WWE fan here? Wow, you
In my
kids.
other class.
Oh, your other class. Well, Dave Clement played in the NFL. This is Bo Allen and Jake Elliott of the Eagles. I've interviewed them. I've interviewed Connor Barwin a bunch of times. I've interviewed different MMA champions over the years. Ronda Rousey, the Curb. I mean, I don't really think of it as who is the most famous person I've interviewed. I just enjoy interviewing people. I like to know people. So, who's next? What's your name?
Casper,
Casper. What's your question?
have you ever played sports in school?
Yes. So I played football, soccer, basketball, baseball. Those are the main four that I played. I was in a couple of weightlifting competitions as well. I don't like playing sports, more just competitions, but those were the main four that I played. What's your name? Emmett? What's your question?
What's your favorite memory from high school sports?
My favorite memory from high school sports was I never wanted to play soccer because my mom sent me to a high school without a football team. And I used to have it my goal to get a yellow card every single game because I was really offended by the fact that a lot of the soccer players were pretentious brats. So as a former city kid myself from South Philly, I like to get under people's skin a little bit when it came to sports. So my favorite memory was the fact that I never scored a goal in soccer my entire life, but I was great at piling up, getting under people's skin. And maybe that's just, maybe I'm more the brat than they were. But that's probably my favorite memory. I wasn't really that great at sports, honestly. I was just very athletic. I could run fast, I could jump, but I really didn't do much else. So that's probably my own favorite. So who's next? What's your name?
Michael,
Michael, what's your question?
did you ever interview professional cross players?
I have not interviewed any professional cross players, but I have, as a personal trainer, trained a couple college lacrosse players. I'm a personal trainer. So, what's your name?
Claire.
Claire, what's your question?
During like live interviews, how do you know what the right and wrong things to say?
I think it's more of a moral compass thing. I think it's more about understanding that, you know, you don't ask certain people certain questions in normal discourse of the day. You know, like you wouldn't walk up to one of your classmates and ask certain questions, right? You know, you wouldn't want certain questions being asked of you, right? So I think that's kind of where the measuring stick is when you're interviewing someone, you kind of already know. It might not be a good idea to ask this because I wouldn't want someone to ask me this. I wouldn't want someone to ask my friend this, my mom this, my dad this, or whoever. I think that's probably the easiest way to go about it. You had your hand up?
Yeah. If you could interview anyone in the world, who would it be?
Good one. I mean, this is kind of a little deep cut, but I would probably go Dan Orlovsky on ESPN because I think it's very fascinating how the man balances his family life, his personal life, and his work life in the way he does. He works a very unique schedule, and I would love to know from him how he feels about how the dynamics of who he is off camera impacts who he is on camera. But that's he's not the biggest name in the world, obviously, but it's just someone I like to learn about people, how people function, how people do things, so I can maybe get better. So that's kind of why. Who's next?
Have you ever like interviewed any wrestlers about like WWE, like you know, like the kind where you like, I think it's called Scholastic.
Yeah, competitive.
Yeah.
I've never interviewed one-on-one. I've written articles about them in the past. You know, obviously, I went to Rutgers at one point, so they have a pretty big wrestling program up there. So I've had to write some articles about wrestling. Covering a sport like wrestling is hard because of the fact that the scope of people who care. Like, for example, I'm a big fan of tennis. Okay, I think tennis is fascinating, but most people don't care about tennis. So it's like, it's more about how can you take the sport and like make it interesting than I can say like who I've specifically interviewed. And I think I've done a pretty good job over the years of making stuff interesting. Who's
Do
next?
one more, maybe? Last question. Sean, what do you got?
Most welcome person.
Oh, who's got a new one? Brianna.
Who's your favorite player to interview after a game?
In terms of like the individual or like the sport?
Individual.
I mean, the easy answer would be the winner. I would say probably the person who didn't have like the biggest like stat line or like the most points. Maybe there's somebody who had like the second or third best game because they're usually the one who did the dirty work to help the team win. So like you probably get more insight out of them than the person who's like in basketball. Like you got a person who scores 30 points, the person scores 10, but the person who scored 10 might have like 10 rebounds as well. And they probably have more insight about like the game than the person who gets up to be like, I scored a lot of points. It was a good day. Like, thanks for playing, buddy. Like, so yeah, I would say it's the person who probably wasn't like the superstar. It's like the person like the next tier down. It's probably like the most fun.
Thank you.